Good evening. Welcome to our meeting, 7:31. Just reminded by our assistant village manager that we are late, so apologies. And welcome everybody. We're going to do the pledge and to go into announcements and everything else. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We have Stuart, Corporation Counsel is there. Hello, Stuart. Okay. Welcome, everybody. And sorry, my mask is bothering me all day today. All right, do we have any announcements? I think you take attendance. Who's doing the attendance?
No, this is just a work session.
Oh, it's a work session, no attendance. By the time I finish my term as mayor, I'll get that right. Every other week we go through this conversation. Okay. Any announcements? I'm gonna go to my right.
No announcement. Mayor.
I do have something I would like to say. It's not really an announcement, but I would like to do a shout out to our sanitation department. Which I love. You know, we have the nicest sanitation guys. They pick up anything, and we put out a lot of stuff, especially around recycling days, especially like paper and stuff. I won't explain why, but you know, they're just so, they smile, they wave, they're nice guys. I don't think they get enough appreciation in the sanitation department. And they, you know, this village has a really good one that picks up pretty much anything. A lot of places don't have that. So I would just like to give a shout out to our nice sanitation.
It's a work session where a formal village manager for the record applauded. But it's true though. Honestly, I actually never knew that until I went through other parts of Westchester and heard people talk about how, you know, they don't pick up everything and they're, you know, during the pandemic, we didn't miss a beat. And you know, everybody has families and a lot of concerns. I think it's during the storms, it's like we have it so good we don't even realize it sometimes. So I think thank you for bringing that up. Deputy Mayor,
No announcement. Mayor.
to my left.
Just the obvious. We had the Indian Point siren test today at 6 o'clock. And reading some of the social media, people are like, well, why are you testing the siren if the plant's shut down? There is still the spent fuel rods that are in the tank. And, you know, anything can happen. So presume it was a good test. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Trustee Lopez is he's not here today. And he will be missed because normally I get some announcements out of this deal. But he is on vacation. Location unknown and will not be announced. So I had a really great time this morning. I had the pleasure of going over to AMD and welcoming new teachers to our district. It's a fun part of being mayor. I never did that as a trustee. And Dana Levenberg was there as well. And it was great. I mean, I just saw so much enthusiasm, and Ray Sanchez was there. They're so excited for the school year. I had said to them that the former mayor is really like the mayor who really had to deal with the new venue of social media at a great length. She was like the mayor of social media because she had to deal with during her tenure this whole evolution and revolution, social media. And I guess for me, it's like the pandemic, you know, it doesn't define us, but I think some of us thought we'd be over it by now, not having this conversation. And here they are, and I had said this, they're really, I don't know, I guess we can call them heroes. I think they're pioneers. I think they're going to make so many adjustments. They're going to go down in history because this is not a one-day event or a one-week event. And I'm looking across this room, people were so excited. So all of you have children going into the school system in this next couple of weeks, you should be really thrilled because I got a chance to speak to some folks. I got a chance to speak with a new school psychologist. I'm sure she'll be very busy. The children are going through a lot, the teachers are going through a lot, so it was just a pure honor. And, you know, for me, my own teachers, and I had said this in my usual bluntness, I remember every bad teacher I ever had, and I remember every good teacher I ever had, and the good ones, and I named them, not all of them, but one was absolutely life-changing for me, as much as my parents were. And even one good teacher in your entire life of your schooling actually could be life-changing. So I asked them to go and change people's lives and get them not to be the next mayors, but the next president. And it was really fun. So I had to at least say something. In that light, I do want to say, and we don't usually do this because I'm not sure it's always appropriate, to be honest with you, but a member of the Board of Education, Dan Lemon, has lost her daughter very recently. And she is a stalwart member of our community in Ossining. And my heart goes out to her, the family. We don't usually make these announcements, but she's a fellow member elected by the public to serve them, and she is involved very deeply with the school system. So I just wanted to send some words of condolences to her and her family. And we are getting ready for a whole bunch of stuff that you should keep your eye on. The town is getting ready for the fireworks. We still have concerts going on. Read the mayor's note. We have the Jewish holidays coming up. We have 9/11 coming up, 20th anniversary. Big moment. This community was very hard hit by 9/11 and the first responders, etc. So lots of stuff still on the boards for the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes open. And I think we can move on to the meeting. Oh, I know I forgot the obvious one. Market Square this Saturday. Is that in your notes? Market Square this Saturday. Come be heard. Be heard, be heard, be heard. We have people coming in for the DRI study to get input from the public about any topic you want to speak about, but they will be asking you questions. Please, I beg you to come down, buy a few things, have some coffee, and maybe you'll even see some of your elected officials down there. Enjoy the weather. It's supposed to be nice this weekend from last time I looked. I can't say it enough. I'll say it again. Come on down in the morning and participate in the input and in the survey. Thank you, Village Manager.
Okay, thank you. So first up, we have Sustainable Westchester to give an update on their community choice aggregation plan. So I want to introduce Paul from Sustainable Westchester, and he will give us a brief presentation and update.
Thank you so much. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes, Paul, I can share it for you, or you can share whatever you prefer.
Okay, I'll share my screen right now. I guess first, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Maddie, as well, for coordinating us to be able to provide this presentation. My name is Paul Presendu. I'm the Outreach Coordinator for Sustainable Westchester, and provided this updated deployments of your community choice aggregation program as part of our compliance with the Public Service Commission, where we kind of talk to you what is kind of like the midway point or not towards the end of your contractual period to let you know how you're doing. And also feel free to also answer any questions that you may have. So I shared this presentation with you well in advance. If you you can also get a copy of the presentation. Some of these slides are hidden. I just want to make sure I kind of go through this just to protect the integrity of your meeting and also to avoid some redundant information and things like that. So we at Sustainable Westchester, we're a nonprofit consortium of 44 local governments throughout Westchester County to support programming and environmental protection and also to support accessibility to renewable energy. We pride ourselves on leveraging our ability to come together across intermunicipal lines and making sure that our programs work for all the geographic diversity of Westchester County and people of all levels, all socioeconomic levels of society as well too. Just a quick overview of the program, the Westchester Power Program. And what it is a community choice. We support municipalities such as the Village of Ossining to create a community choice aggregation program. And that is a renewable energy option for residents that have Con Edison as their default supplier. So many of you should know is that your energy bill is broken out into two parts from Con Edison: the supply and distribution. And Con Edison will always be there for the distribution of your energy due to their ownership of the power poles, the cable, all the wiring that delivers the energy. but the community choice aggregation now allows you to leverage the village's population to be able to provide a renewable energy option for residents within the village to be able to offset their carbon emissions. The CCA program for the village of Ossining is powered by New York State hydropower renewable energy certificates, and that allows you to really be able to support not only New York State climate goals for this Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, but also UN climate goals. And some of you may know the CLCPA climate goals are very robust and very ambitious, where we had to be at 70% renewable by the year 2030, and by the year 2040, we had to have zero carbon emissions from energy supply and consumption. So our Westchester Power program really municipalities to be able to have that option. It's very competitive in pricing to Con Edison and be able to have this available for residents, where we're set the criteria, help with advocacy, and really helping you position yourself through the NYStretch Clean Energy Communities programming. We're currently in 28 municipalities, powering roughly 115,000 residents in small businesses, residential properties, small businesses, and that is currently a third of Westchester County in total for the total potential consumer base. And right now we have the city of Yonkers that's going to be joining, which is very, very great, considering that they are the third. I think they're part of the third largest city now for the new census data in New York State. And also it's going to show that this program is picking up momentum, where we're able to get more throughout Westchester County and accessibility for this programming. In terms of our environmental impact so far, we are very proud of the work we've been doing. Over 775,000 metric tons of CO2 mitigated since the inception of this program. That's the equivalency of taking 168,000 cars off the road for 1 year, or the planting of 12.8 million tree seedlings. We're very proud of the work being done by the village, because you have, as a village, offset 22,272 metric tons of CO2, which is the equivalency of taking 4,830 cars off the road for 1 year within the village, or the planting of 367,490 tree seedlings throughout the village in a span of 10 years. And for those of you who may or may not know, 1 metric ton is the equivalency of 2,204.6 pounds. So it's really a great work that's being done by the village, but we can't spend too much time patting ourselves on the back, considering what's happening internationally. We got to put we have to keep pushing, because if there's any community in the United States of America that has the ability to achieve this carbon neutrality, I think it's Westchester County, because of our ability to work together. Quick overview of our benefits. Vetted community program. We are not an energy supply company or ESCO. We are a community nonprofit where we're municipally vetted. We're held accountable by you as members of the village board. We're held accountable by you, Madam Mayor. We want to make sure that our program is there to support municipal leadership to help get this word out to your respective constituency. And our ability to come together allows us to have very competitive pricing to Con Edison. Energy supply companies are going to want to come to us to provide great pricing for the energy pricing, because it's going to save them money from having to do a robust door-to-door program and act like they're selling life insurance or something like that. And this program is complete option, no fees, no penalties, no surprises. And we always make sure we maintain open channels of communication to let you know about new price or any changes in the program. Advocacy education is the best part about the job. We help educate people on basic things in energy literacy, letting them know how to read their bills and how they can work side by side with leaders such as yourself with introducing potential programming for not only energy protection, reduction of carbon emissions, but also other programs that we may have, such as zero waste programming, community solar. The list goes on and on. It's really educating people, shows your commitment to working with them as a co-equal partner. This is a quick overview of the pricing that we have currently within our Con Edison territory. It's 7.41 cents per kilowatt for 100% renewable, which is the New York State hydropower, as I mentioned before. In terms of small and commercial businesses, have that rate at 7.1 cents per kilowatt. And we also have a standard supply option for residents that aren't comfortable with paying the residential, the renewable price, which is at 6.75 cents per kilowatt and 6.45 cents per kilowatt for small commercials. And these are fixed rates you're going to be paying all throughout the year, which is very, very competitive to what's being offered right now through Con Edison. A quick overview of our payment. We offer to be competitive, not promising to beat the Con Edison price, but we have beaten the price historically throughout 2016 going into 2019. And then, there was a drop in the oil and gas prices. Also, the COVID-19 pandemic didn't really help out I don't know if any of you were paying attention to news. There's points where they were actually could receive money for taking barrels of oil, and there was a little bit of a gas craze that happened in 2020. I don't know if any of you saw videos of people going to gas stations and putting gasoline in buckets and things like that. A lot of crazy things are happening when the gas prices drop. But we so far in 2021 have experiencing a strong recovery, and you can see a similar trend like this for these smaller commercial accounts. And just a little bit of a silver lining, the 7.41 cents per kilowatt is better than any price you will see if you go on the New York State Power to Choose website for hydropower. We're proud that even though we're seeing the rise in renewable energy certificate pricing, we are locked in. We're on a contract until June of 2022 at a great rate. And when we go to negotiate, we'll be going out to negotiate together to be able to make sure that we're maintaining the best price for the finances in your constituency. Just a quick overview of the pricing in comparison. Brackets are what we're behind, outer brackets is ahead of pricing. And then for the current contractual period, if you're telling somebody, someone might come to you and complain like, oh, the price I'm paying for New York State Renewable is more expensive than Con Edison, you can tell them, yes, you understand that for $1.75 more per month, they're completely offsetting their residential carbon emissions. And then you can also share these numbers and things like that. But it kind of shows like, well, how much are we willing to pay more to be able to support the planet and support climate goals within the village of Ossining. And it's similar pricing for these smaller commercial accounts. This was the average account within the village of Ossining's CCA program. Residential accounts 407 kilowatts per month, and for the commercial account 238. And similar pricing right there, just so you can know what the pricing is in comparison, and show that even though prices might be up relatively, it's not really that bad in considering what the environmental repercussions are if we don't offset our carbon emissions. And another thing, a lot of last program I talked to you about is community solar, which allows you to further leverage the power of the community within the village of Ossining. This allows any resident, whether it's in the CCA program or not, to subscribe to a nearby solar farm and have the renewable, the solar credits that are generated during that monthly billing cycle reflected on their bill as up to a 10% savings on their energy bill. And this is something that is great. It's not only great for environmental justice, it's also great for economic justice to make sure that this is the benefits of solar energy and the savings of it are accessible to anybody. So that means there's no installation that's on your property. You have some people that want to get into solar, but don't have roofs that are strong enough, or they might live in a multi-family home unit where their landlord is unable to supply this for them as a benefit. But this allows them to support a nearby solar farm and have the benefits of up to 10% savings reflected on their energy bill through solar credits. And it's great for anybody. It doesn't matter if they're in the program, they're out of the program, or they have their own private energy supply companies. It's something that's completely on the rise, and it's going to be accessible to residents. And actually right now, the New York State Public Service Commission provided consolidated billing with community solar and the community choice aggregation program as part of an environmental justice and economic justice agenda, which means that now through consolidated billing, everyone in the CCA program is also going to subscribe to a nearby solar farm to community solar to gain the up to 10% savings on their energy bill. And this is going to start for low to moderate income customers and then be available to everyone else. And this is really, really great and exciting because now people that are in the CCA program and offsetting their carbon emissions are also going to receive that up to 10% savings, which honestly might kind of mitigate the parentheses and the brackets. I saw the numbers I showed you before, but it's really great for economic savings, and you're really bringing it first to the most economically vulnerable members of your constituency. So things are really going in the right direction. And in the future, Dan Welsh, who's the director of the Westchester Power Program, will be reaching out to you to share how we're going to make a little bit tweaks and changes to the enabling law that was passed by the Village Board of Trustees, just to make sure that the opt-out CDG of the Community Solar Program is going to be accessible for the residents. And that's going to be great coming in the near future. Key milestones and key dates: June 30th, 2022 is the end of the current contractual period, which means that May of 2022 is when we're going to have the notification mailing go out to people with the 30-day opt-out period. In March and April of this upcoming of 2022 is where we're going to have the RFP and the contract, where we're going to have the terms of what people the price cannot exceed for the next contractual period for the CCA program. And the last slide is just about outreach and education. We pride ourselves of having strong collateral of digital and local press. So if you know any local newspapers that we could put some ads in, please feel free to let us know. My email is paul@stateofwestchester.org. Also social media, we have a great, strong presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please like and share if you see anything or any of our content. And we also have digital collateral videos I'm willing to share with you for your constituency on people knowing how to read their bills, about other programs, Energy Smart Homes. We have a lot of great programs and that we can help share videos on if you want to know about anything. And also in terms of virtual educations, I'm willing to host Zooms for a neighborhood association or any organization that you may have out there. So we want to make sure you get this word out of the programming so it can benefit you and help reduce the ecological footprint of the village of Ossining. And that's about it. I don't know if any of you have any questions. That's pretty much it on my end for the presentation, and I'm willing to answer any questions any of you may have.
Great, thank you, Paul, appreciate it. Questions? I have a couple of comments, but I don't think there is questions.
I do have questions. Hey, Paul, thank you. We always look forward to seeing presentations from you guys. So I do appreciate you coming over. So, and you kind of touched a little bit of what one of the things I was going to ask, and definitely was the price difference that we have seen for the past few years since we started going into this program. And it was a big difference. It was a big challenge for some people suffering from unemployment and struggling with keeping a job and everything like that. So, but the price of the renewable, pretty much, it was higher than what people were expected to be. That being said, do you have a number of maybe how many village residents have usually call you after they saw the price change and actually opt out of the system itself?
Yeah, I don't have an exact number, but it does happen. It's all about, that's pretty much sustainability. It's doing what you can within your means. And we understand that some people emotionally want to do what they can. It's just the finance, the economic barrier, which really prevents it. And, Con Edison's price, has been, I guess you could say, due to variable rate. Sometimes through Con Edison, you're paying like 5.8 cents per kilowatt. And then it jumps up to like 9 cents per kilowatt or 10 cents per kilowatt. But when you're comparing your bill to like your neighbor or your aunt or your sister, someone in the neighborhood, and you find out that you're paying 1.5 cents more per kilowatt, that kind of infuriates you and things like that. So that does happen. It's not a large number, but some people do call us and say they want to opt out and still be aware of things that we're doing, but it's just not within the economic means, because the COVID-19 pandemic has pretty much exacerbated some of the longstanding underlying issues of society, such as food insecurity, being able to buy school supplies for your children. The list goes on and on. But we do have some people that do contact us. That's why the first thing we try to do is we encourage them to enroll into the community solar as well too, because we feel as if by them being in the CCA programming and also having community solar with that 10% savings, it pretty much puts them more on a level playing field on what they're paying and what they're doing. So we try to have that kind of a forward-thinking conversation, because we don't want them to leave, because them being in the program really supports municipal numbers and our ability to continue to leverage the best pricing available.
Of course, definitely. I'll be curious actually to see how many people have opted out this past 2 years. If you can provide those numbers,
yeah,
to us, to me, it would be very helpful.
I could provide those numbers to you specifically for the village of Ossining of how many people were in the program last year and how many are currently right now. I could.
Yeah, if you could do that for the past 2 years.
Yes.
That would be great. The other one is, I guess, not to you, but Patty, we have this on our website.
This is in the agenda, so
I know.
yes,
I don't think it's on a link in that agenda.
it should be, yeah. We added it on Monday because there were a
Okay.
couple things we needed to fix, but it's been
Got
up
it.
there since
Okay.
Monday.
Cool. And that answers my question. I know I have it on the email, so, all right, thanks, Patty. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it. 2 things. Thank you. You stayed in the 20-minute rate. I'm going to use you as my next example for other presenters. But I do, all kidding aside, great presentation. For the public to know, we have been involved with Sustainable Westchester for a long time, and we've been involved in this project. I mean, we have always been sort of with our hands up first to be involved in this. Very proud of that. It wasn't started by me, it was started with people for me, but we're continuing in that mode. And I'm very excited about that. I know that both the village manager and assistant village manager meet with Sustainable Westchester, I want to say every other week or once a month in my stead. which is the right thing. So very involved. I thank them both. Nothing here is a surprise to us because everyone in this community is very involved. I have solar panels, so I don't benefit as much. But I'm going to tell you, I'm very excited about the ability to participate in the community solar. That was a big move for you guys to bring to the community and for the county. Not sure why there are municipalities that aren't joining you. I don't want to point any out. That's not my job, but they should all be joining because I think what you guys have proven is there's strength in numbers.
Yes.
When we all work together, you have better footing for negotiations. You have better ability. And it doesn't really show up here because of the way the energy commodities are. But, when we have another gas shortage, or if we're going to have places where there are major peaks and valleys, the way you actually buy in advance, I mean, you're buying futures and energy, will actually help the folks that sign up. We just have not had major peaks and valleys in the past few years, which is good. It's good. But for those of us that remember oil prices that really hurt families, when they tripled, they quadrupled, they went up 8 times as much. I mean, it became a huge bill at one point. Those were not fun days, and this kind of purchase actually helps flatten that. So I think it is like an insurance policy. I think you said it very briefly of saying, we buy for you in advance and we know what it's going to be. So these are great things. I appreciate all the stuff that you guys do. There's been some really creative thinking. So thank you. And, you can always count that both the village and the town have always had their hands up to say, we're moving forward. I do want the public to also know that Sustainable Westchester isn't just a nonprofit. It is a member organization of municipalities. So that this is a good use of some tax dollars. It's not expensive. It's not a lot of money. It's really not. But it allows us to be really involved in what's going on in environmental issues, to be a participant, to be asked about things in advance. So all like good stuff. I do wish the pricing was a little bit lower. When we first started this journey, actually your pricing was lower, which I think is why Deputy Mayor is asking, because it was one of the premises was that the prices would always be lower, and people got excited. But you know what? The differential is really pennies, and what we get for it overall is just huge. I think we're also getting like a grant or something from Sustainable Westchester.
Yeah, hi Paul, we worked with Lauren at Sustainable Westchester for the Energy Smart Homes program. That was very successful and helped a lot of folks in Ossining town, village, and in the village of Briarcliff do some really well vetted and in many cases inexpensive energy improvements to their homes.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, it's really the cooperative piece of it. I know I'm going a little bit off of your presentation, but I'm taking the opportunity of having you here to sort of have that conversation. And also when the public sees this and wants to get more educated, maybe we put it more clearly on our website, they'll sit there and say, okay. And I'm hoping, most importantly, and this I think you did not stress enough, is how helpful you all are in reading these very complicated bills that people get. Most people, myself included, do not understand any of that stuff. And I've gotten super positive feedback that when people ask about how to read their bill, whether it's Con Ed and about ESCOs, they get solicited emails, phone calls, people are dropping by their homes before COVID. I want the public to really appreciate that you guys are there for them, that you will explain things for them. ESCOs are complicated, commodity energy buying is complicated, megahertz are complicated, solar panel buying on your roof and what it does is complicated. The credits you get, so you are a font of information. I just want to let the public know that you are just a resource for them, not for us.
Yes. Thank you.
You guys are there.
Thank you for your leadership, Madam Mayor. And we do help out with those fundamental energy literacy things. We actually are working on a how to read your bill campaign right now that's going to be streamlined to everybody. So make sure that you and your leadership get there. And we also do support phone calls. We get calls from customers from ESCO offers. It's a very predatory business. You could be talking to somebody, and they ask you for your credits in account, they'll check your status. And next thing you know, you're locked in a contract for a year, and you're, you know, it's yeah, crazy thing. We've heard some crazy stories from people, and we do help out, you know, because especially some of the municipalities don't have that bandwidth to have a sustainability coordinator. So it shows that we can really all just come together and work on the same thing. It's just about, I guess, the implementation and making it work within the respective local community.
Great. Is there anything you want to share with us? I'm sure you're going around doing these presentations.
Oh,
There's something we haven't thought about, or you're gonna do one of these, I'm gonna leave on the high because.
You're doing great work. Because you have that organization as well, called Green Ossining. It helps you out so much.
Oh, I forgot to mention them, yeah.
Amazing things being done.
Great. Thank you, sir. Very much
All right.
appreciated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything? Thank you.
Next, we have introduction of NYStretch code, and this is another strategy and tool that the village can use as we position ourselves to be the greenest community in the country.
Thank you.
So with that, I would like to turn this over to Corporation Counsel, Stuart Kahan.
We feel like you're muted.
Yeah, we're better. Okay. I was wondering why I was talking to myself, but we had a meeting yesterday. The building inspector, who I know is on the call, our planning director, and the assistant village manager met with two folks who are very much involved with the NYStretch Energy Code. Briefly, what this is, and Joe, I know you're on here, so if I say something incorrect, please correct me. The state currently follows the 2020 Energy Conservation Construction Code. As part of the New York State energy law, municipalities were permitted to adopt a more stringent energy code. NYSERDA has assisted in preparing what is now known as the NYStretch Energy Code, which is essentially a more robust energy code which municipalities can adopt. It is anticipated that much of what is in the Stretch Energy Code will in fact ultimately be adopted by the state, but that may not be for a couple of years. What the Stretch Energy Code does is it is very specific in terms of both residential and commercial. It deals with new construction and extensive renovation on existing construction. And I know, Maddie, we got a presentation yesterday from Mike DeWine, who is, to use a quaint term, the circuit rider for NYSERDA in this part of the state. Although the way he described it, he seemed to describe that he is the circuit rider for the entire state. But basically, what the village would need to do is adopt a local law, which would be a slight revision of the 2017 change to the Housing Maintenance Code that the village adopted, whereby instead of adopting the current Energy Conservation Construction Code, you would be adopting the Stretch Energy Code, which is it's basically a 72-page addendum to what we call the ECCC NYS. And that document basically has changes to the code. Once it gets filed with the Secretary of State, the village would then have the more robust, as we call it, energy code. The important thing here, one of the things here that, and that Maddie can comment on, is that if it's adopted and in effect by December 31st, the village is then eligible for a $5,000 grant. I believe, not Maddie, it's from NYSERDA. And there is other grant money that is available after that. There is extensive training that is allowed, but the legislation itself is fairly simple. Unless you are the city or town of Ithaca, which adopted its own energy code, the legislation can literally be one paragraph that the village has adopted this code. There's a slight change because it was discovered by the state that there is actually an inconsistency between the stretch energy code and the current energy conservation construction code. That may be another 2 sentences to just resolve that. But that's it. And I know that Joe is going to have some training on some of these aspects, I think next week, and other members in the building department will follow thereafter. That's really what it's about. Any other questions, I'm happy to answer, but what it does do is it basically makes for a more energy efficiency with regard to new construction, and I said significant existing construction. It has been adopted already in the city of Beacon. It's been adopted in Bedford, the village of Athens, upstate New York. I think it's actually the town of Athens, upstate New York. I know Irvington is considering it. Dobbs Ferry is considering it. So it has been done in a number of municipalities, including the town of Southampton out on Long Island. So it's gaining steam throughout the state. But again, the availability of the grants for passage by the end of the year are one of the reasons that we're presenting it to you folks at this time. At a future work session, we present you the actual legislation, which, as I said, can be fairly minimal. Bedford has it a little bit more extensively, but when we spoke to Mike DeWine yesterday for NYSERDA, he said that the legislation can be as simple as the Beacon legislation, which, as I said, is just a paragraph. So that's what we've got. As I said, Joe is here. Joe, if you have any more of the sort of specifics that relate to the stretch energy code to give information to the board, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think Stuart, you kind of explained it pretty good. It's voluntary. It's basically to encourage a better energy, more energy efficiency than what's in the current code. As it was explained to us, that it's probably going to be something that's going to be put into the next code, maybe 2023. But it's requesting that municipalities within the state of New York adopt this to get kind of a jump on what's probably going to become the next code anyway, into promoting better energy efficiency within homes. So if the board is willing to adopt this, as what's going on right now in other municipalities, essentially we would be getting a couple of years ahead of what's going to ultimately be the New York State's energy code compliance. So it's something that we're going to be taking some classes. Next week I'm signed up for some classes to get a little bit more affiliated with it. The rest of the staff is going to be doing the same in October. So before the end of the year, we will have more training and be able to, if it's adopted, it'll be something that will be able to guide architects and homeowners and builders as to what the new requirements will be.
I get what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying. I just don't know what it is. Like, I don't actually have any sense of what the differences are between what we currently have. Like, I get the concept, I understand the goal, I understand the desired outcome, I understand the grant incentive, I understand that it's inevitable, so it's a matter of whether we do it now or later. I get all that. But I'm not actually understanding what the stretch is. Like, what are the key 3 items, for example, that makes this difference and defines it as a stretch over what we have today? Would you be able, do you know that yet?
Not fully until I kind of get more acclimated with the classes. But what my assumption would be is right now there is basic standard energy compliance. There's 2 methods. You can use a computer, what they call a res check, the comp check for commercial properties, and it basically takes insulation values, efficiency of heating equipment, cooling equipment, and then you have a standard of what measures you have to meet to make energy compliance in your home. With the stretch code, it would probably push the property owners, homeowners, building owners into more high efficient heating equipment and cooling equipment, and make it actually more efficient, so it would be using less energy. And it also is a code that pushes people into more using more of the natural resources for energy, like solar, and to do more of the more updated types of versions of using natural energy, as opposed to going with oil and natural gas.
Mayor, it might help. Maybe I can just, this is from the NYSERDA. It's their frequently asked questions, but it's sort of right what you said. What are the key changes in NYStretch compared to the 2020? The key changes include the building envelope, improved window performance, air barrier commissioning, and air leakage testing. For lighting, reduced interior and exterior lighting, power and lighting controls. For electrical whole building energy monitoring. For renewable and electric vehicle readiness, and mandatory mechanical ventilation for residential buildings. The estimate is that it would save energy costs anywhere between 10 and about 12% from what they currently would be under the current code.
One of the really big things, obviously this is a big promotion that's coming from the state to say that, hey, we want this new stretch code to be implemented, but we're not requiring it yet. It will be sort of most likely in 2 years, stretch code will be adopted as a standard code. And so one of the incentives that's provided to municipalities to take this code on is that they give you extra points on the grants that you apply for when you're applying for state grants, like towards, applications towards the DRI or regional council grant applications. So there's a big benefit to us there in adopting the stretch code now, because it's coming down the pipe anyways. And if we get ahead of it now, we get a little extra plus on our grant applications.
Okay, I mean, that's all logical. I don't know about the cost savings, because the truth is that most of this stuff is so expensive. I drive all electric, as you guys know. They're not cheap cars. Over time, they're great. Not for everybody though. They're not the least expensive option for the size car. I have solar panels, also not inexpensive to put solar panels on. You have to make a commitment to it over the long haul. Getting bills for $15.96 every month, it's a pleasure. But we had to put money up front to put them up in the first place, and things like that. So I'm just going to say that I'm only hesitant in the concept of cost savings as a conversation, because I think it's unfair to the residents to talk in those terms, because we have to recognize that all of the material that you need and the installation that you need and all that actually tends to be a little bit expensive. There's all new things, new cars more expensive than older cars. I mean, than used cars. So I don't like to go down the path of cost savings to the consumer, because I think it's probably more of a break-even analysis. Same conversation we just had with Sustainable Westchester. When we first thought it was going to be huge difference, now it's a couple pennies more, but still worth it. I'm still buying electric. It's not but I just don't like that as the argument. I think all the other stuff is a very fair game for the municipality, and it is better, and it'll upgrade, and it's more efficient. How many houses do we go into where in the winter the wind literally goes through the windows? Once I got new windows in, they cost a bit more.
That's my house.
No, you have a beautiful older house, but I
Yeah, with very old windows.
Yeah, I mean, we replaced ours. Ours were the original 1955 windows, man, and it cost us a bit more, but man, what a difference. I mean, what a difference, because there's solar. I would do it a bunch of times over again. So I'm a proponent. I'm just going to say that when we talk about it, I just want to be realistic to consumers, so that everybody hears it loud and clear, and everybody goes in with eyes wide open. I think it's good. I see no reason not to support it. I really would like us to be the greenest community in the country, because I think especially in this area, sitting on top of the Hudson River, it's super important. And I want to be an example in the sense that people should know we're interested, and they'll bring forth over and over again, which is what's happening now people are coming to us and saying, let's try this, let's try that. I think that's good. So I appreciate you guys putting this forth. Does anybody have any disagreements or anything, any reason we would not all support it? I don't know. I'm sorry.
It's gonna be in front of us in the future anyway, so we might as well jump on board and be a leader.
Okay, yeah, I think that alone is probably a good. Manny, I see a
Yeah.
smile underneath the mask. I see a smile. What's
I
up?
was actually at I thought you were going in a different direction.
Oh, sorry.
For a minute, but, I agree with everything you have said in regards to, look, to me, $5,000 of a grant, $5,000 of a grant is very nothing at the end of the day, sure. One of the things that I have a concern, there's a few questions, not that I don't, look, I'm in the field of the architectural field, and I've been doing for the past year now, I've been doing a lot of work in New York City. And New York City has their own building code. And it's totally different from New York State code, it's totally different from the ICC code. And they have totally different restrictions, and they have a green code program, they have all this other stuff in there. So yes, something like that is common. This is a few of my concerns, I guess, just general questions. Jump in, whoever wants to answer them. Many years ago, we were talking about green code. What is the difference between the green code and this stretch energy code within itself? What are the two main difference, I guess, in a way, sure. In regards to implementation, one of the things that I think Stuart said, I think Stuart said that there's, for existing construction or existing housing, or they're trying to do some sort of a big addition. What is that big addition? What is the percentage they finance? Because you can come in right now on our code, either Stuart or Joe, correct me, we have a limitation where it's 250 square feet or maybe 100 square feet. You don't need to go in front of the planning board. It's just, it's like a small addition that you have to do. If you're just doing like small bathroom, let's say, do you fall under this criteria? So, and right now Stuart brought up windows, roof. Right now, by New York State code, we don't require it, and even a couple of years back, we changed some of the regulations on if you're replacing your windows, you don't need a building permit. If you're replacing your roof, you don't need a building permit. So all these things, to me, will affect this. And what does that look like? So if we're going to be enforcing something, if we're implementing something, what is the enforcement? And we really would like to, I will hate that we actually, instead of helping our community, we're going to hurt our community with some of the stuff that it looks really nice, but it will, I think other municipalities, for example, I think Jaime or Stuart mentioned that, like what kind of boiler, what the efficiency of the boiler. Greenberg has been doing that for years. As soon as you put an addition more than $20,000 in Greenberg, you have to hire a consultant, an energy consultant that gives you pretty much what the appliances ratings are, what the windows are, what the boiler looks like. Pretty much you have to have another consultant to tell you what the things are going into your house that comply with the energy requirements that Greenberg has. So all these things, I don't want to come back in 6 months from now. They said that, for us to be able to get a building permit, someone needs to certify something else, that the people or the resident that is trying to do something needs to hire an additional person for them to supply that information, for them to get that information into the building permit. Those are my concerns, few of them right now. Again, and I had this conversation with Joe before and with the previous building inspector, where I saw different projects around the village, multi-residential projects being built but with 2x4s. Meanwhile, a residential home is being built by 2x6. Unfortunately, New York State was pointed out to me at that time that as long as you meet an R factor of an R15 with a continuous wrapping in the outside, you can get away with doing a 2x4 construction. So there are all these loopholes within New York State building code already. So I'm not sure how was that going to implement or how the interaction of the stretch code with the building code itself. So to me, there's a lot of things that we're not seeing is great. When you talked about when the state comes in with all this stuff, it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have all this green stuff. In reality, to me, is like they went from the ICC not too long ago. They went from New York State code to the ICC. They went back to New York State code to duplicate the ICC code that was the same thing just because they wanted to be. I mean, I'm in support of the concept. I'm not sure how the implementation is going to come about. So I would like to learn from Joe when he goes to his classes and the training at least to hear more a little bit more of what I could be totally wrong, and I hope I'm totally wrong. But those are sort of the concerns. What's the implementation going to take, and how is that going to be on the department level? I don't want to keep hurting, or putting another layer to a small resident that comes in, wants to do an addition to their house, and now they have to do something else to it.
So Joe, I think the comments here are, so one side, I agree, it's gonna happen anyway, so it's just a matter of time. On the other side, it's really not the other side. On the different side is, all this sounds great, 5,000 is not, it's nice, we don't make decisions on a $5,000 grant. That's, and not that you were saying that, it's just it's a nice gift, it's nice, might as well, right? But Joe, I think one of the things you're gonna have to do is take an average consumer, an average house, and a multi-dwelling, and say, in reality, once you go to your class, like, what does this do to someone? Does it make them have more permits? Does it have them go to more hoops? Is it really doing anything? To Manny's point, it wouldn't be the first time we've had, state government roll out a 72-page whatever that accomplishes whatever they think it's going to accomplish, but not for our residents. And we care about the residents at the end of the day about this. So as you go through your training, let's keep a running tab that you can answer the questions about in the real world and in real time. At the end of the whole thing, what's the benefit to anybody? So as I said, I am a big proponent of it, but I'm not naive. I know that some of these things, as Paul had said earlier, they're not cheap to do. And you have to sort of wait for break even. It's pretty far out there. So you have to make these commitments, and you have to have the money to do it in the first place. So you need to go through what's the hoops? What's the difference? Is it better? Is it worse than what we have? If it's not better than what we have, if it's neutral, that may be okay with Manny. But if it's not even neutral, then no. We have to do what's right for our residents. And I think people will agree on that. I'm glad you're bringing it up. So more to come on this, and thanks for bringing it forward. I know why you did it tonight.
Yeah.
Because we need to get moving on and have the conversation. This will be the time that we're doing.
Yeah, I think
Mayor,
we
I
really
think
appreciate
it would be helpful if perhaps at a future work session, Mr. DeWine, who is the one who gave us the lecture, he would be more than happy to address the board and go through a full discussion of what it is, which
Okay.
might be
That'd be great.
helpful as well.
Well, it could be the board, or it could be one or two members of the board who are.
Oh, but he has a full, well, however you folks want to do it, I'm just saying it might well be helpful.
And I think Manny, it's so we're not taking everybody. I mean, this isn't interested, you're somebody else, or we do it in front of the full board. It'll just have to be on the agenda. I'm simply suggesting a more efficient way that I think we're all on the same page on this.
Whatever the board thinks on that is fine.
Okay. So you saying something, Stuart?
I said, whatever you folks think is fine, however you
Okay,
want to
thank
present
you.
it.
I didn't hear it. Thanks. Anything else?
To address just one of the things that Trustee Casada mentioned. One of the things I did ask yesterday was, I was listening into what additional certifications and things that would be needed, should the stretch code ask for certain things. And some of the things that they are required to be done are things that we do already. So for example, if you were doing, they have a version of the stretch code for res check and comp check. So when an architect or an engineer is going to be using that as part of their method of figuring out what their energy compliance, what it needs to be. The difference would just be that you're using this application as opposed to the one that you normally do. So if the registered architect is going to use that application and they get their, whatever their compliance method, whatever the decision is from the report, what they need to do. If that architect is signing and sealing that, I wouldn't be asking them to, have some other energy consultant weigh in, because they've been able to use an application that's already provided by the state through the stretch code. And if you're using that application, then you're getting what the analysis is of that home. So I wouldn't see why they would need to, hire anyone else. And some of the other method, like when you put in, new duct work and so forth, we already asked that they have to do a duct leakage test, which is, a certified professional to do that. And with the stretch code, that would be the same compliance. You would have to hire somebody to do that test. It meets all the requirements. You pass, you fail, whatever the result is. So I don't think that they would have to, wouldn't put the architect, the engineer, the homeowner at a risk of spending more money for additional consultants or additional, test reports to be done. I do see what you're saying when it comes to the point that, to get a higher energy efficiency, it would mean buying, better quality windows that would be more expensive, buying a better, heating equipment, which is going to be more expensive. But I think the idea is you're spending the money for these products, these materials now, but in the long run, you're saving a lot more in your energy costs down the road, just like you do with solar panels. You're paying money up front with the understanding in the long term, you're going to be saving money. And I believe this, I'll take the class and get more of an understanding of it. But it appears that that's almost the same thing in this what they're doing here is, yes, there'll be a bigger cost to buy the more high efficiency items, but in the long run on your home, you'll be saving in energy.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And maybe to answer Stuart's question, and sees that the board, or at least one of the trustees, also want to be part of this conversation, I'll be more than happy to schedule just a meeting with him and Joe probably, and whoever else wants to be in staff in there, to answer some of the questions that I have. So,
No, it's, I don't think anyone wants to be or not. It's just that the village, I think the issue for me is that we have these calendars, the agendas get busier and busier. This is one of these things that I think we could trust, and we do this often to one or two. If more than two of you, and Omar will be watching this, so I'm saying it, if more than two people want to be involved, then we will have it at a work session. If fewer than three people want to be involved, any two, then we can do this. I myself actually don't have an interest in the detail. I look forward to a summary. But if we have three or more of us that are specifically interested in this conversation, let me know. And the village manager and I are going to set up this on an agenda. I think that's actually what my intention was when I made that statement. So I think we're on to the next thing.
Next up is Corporation Counsel again, procurement policy revisions. Stuart, you are muted again.
Keep forgetting. Folks, earlier this week, I had sent you an email about this particular topic. The village's procurement policy, as you know, is adopted every year at the reorganization meeting. I've had some discussions with the village treasurer about some need to revise portions of it because some of it is not as complete as it needs to be. But one of the most important things that is not in the policy and is something which the treasurer and I have talked about is the adoption of what is called the best value standard. And essentially what that means is it allows the village to deviate from the lowest and most responsible bidder, which is generally how bids or contracts are awarded in the municipality. The best value standard allows the village to effectively set up a quantitative and qualitative basis for determining who that best bidder is. You may see that in certain types of contracts dealing with contracts that may require servicing of particular products or things like that. Best value standard has been in effect in New York since 2012. There are literally hundreds of municipalities in New York that have adopted it. And it's what it basically does, as I said, is it allows the municipality in specific circumstances as determined either through the board or through the village manager or through the particular department that is in need of a particular item to utilize best value. Best value cannot be used for a public work contract. It can only be used for what we call a purchase contract or for service or for purchasing of goods. But it does allow the village to, again, get off of just the process of just going by lowest bidder. There are numerous municipalities in Westchester that use it, but as I said, it is used in many places throughout the state. The reason I raise this is that although the best value standard can be part of the procurement policy, it has to be adopted by local law. You cannot be adopted simply by virtue of the policy. So as I said, we would be including the best value standard in the procurement policy because it can apply not only to contracts in excess of $20,000 where competitive bidding is required, but it can also be used for contracts under $20,000 if in fact the circumstances exist. It is not a blanket grant to use other than lowest possible bidder, but it does provide the ability for the municipality to deviate from that standard when necessary. The thought from the treasurer and myself is that it would be something for the board to consider. Again, if to be adopted and put into the village procurement policy, it would require a local law adopted by the village to adopt the best value standard.
Thank you, Stuart. Anybody have any comments?
Well, I think it makes sense. I mean, anybody who gets estimates on doing work for the house, you don't always necessarily take the lowest bid, but you take the bid that seems to, it's gonna pay off in the long run. It's gonna be quality work and, you know, you might pay a little more, but you get a better value. I think it makes a lot of sense to do that.
Yep, I think, yeah, that's exactly right. I think that years ago, before they instituted this, lots of stuff was going on, the same vendor always got the same work, et cetera, et cetera. The whole idea of bidding is a good idea. It sort of locks people in when you have to choose the least expensive, because sometimes, as you said, you get what you pay for. And the quality suffers. And also, local vendors may not have as much of a chance. Maybe it's a little bit more, but you want to make sure that your local economy is there. So all sorts of good reasons. I see no reason to say no to this one. We're good? We're good? Yeah, okay, Stuart, so.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, I should point out one thing you just mentioned. A number of the municipalities include in their procurement codes, as well as with their best value, that if you want that to get business to get contracts or bids from local contractors, what you can do is you can basically say that if the local contractor is within 10% of, let's say, the lowest bid, you could then get in touch with that local contractor and say, can you meet this, or can you come to some way? And that also can work in conjunction with the best value standard. So there are other parts of that standard as well. But what we can do is we can prepare the necessary local law, present it at a future work session, and then have it in time for the revised procurement policy, which I will also have for the board in advance, obviously, of the reorg meeting, so that the board can see it and have a conversation of it before it's voted on.
Okay, good. All righty, thank you.
Okay, next, it's Corporation Counsel Kahan once again, and this is the proposal for law 1421, which has to do with code administration and certificate of occupancies. So with that, I will turn it over to our Corporation Counsel once again.
Thank you, Village Manager. Folks, again, I had sent you a note on this earlier in the week. Proposed local law 14 of 2021 is something that this village has discussed for a number of years. It was discussed early in my tenure in 2017. Looking back at my predecessor's files, it was discussed many times before that. It is a local law which I have discussed with our building inspector, which would allow and which would not allow, which would require that before there is a transfer of property, be it residential or commercial, that the building department obtain an inspection of the premises and issue an updated certificate of occupancy for the premises. The purpose behind this is to get violations or open permits cleared and closed. Simply put, I sent to you as well a note that I received from prior Corporation Counsel Dixon with some comments that she had with regard to the proposed legislation. And subsequent to that, I provided you with a revised version of Local Law 14, 2021, which dealt with what I think was perhaps the most significant comment that my predecessor had, which dealt with, what do you deal essentially with, let's say a vacant building or a building where the owner is trying to sell but does not have the funds or the wherewithal to make the necessary corrections. The revision that is in here would effectively allow that in the case of a vacant building, the prospective purchaser would provide an escrow payment to the village, and the village would do an inspection, determine what is outstanding, if there is anything outstanding, and then the prospective purchaser would have to get an application in for a building permit by a date set by the building department. And once the work is completed, the escrow would be returned. The idea, I guess I said, is to get compliance. And I know Trustee Fritchie had asked the question, wouldn't most of these issues be picked up in a title report? The answer is yes. But we do have a number of sales in the village that are basically without any bank financing. They're just cash deals and no title report is done. And what happens is you are perpetuating the violation that exists in the building. We already have a provision in our code that if there is an outstanding violation issued to a current owner, the subsequent owner or purchaser would be covered under that same violation, because in most cases, particularly if it's a title report, that subsequent purchaser is aware of those violations. But what this particular legislation would do, and I should point out, it is seen in Peekskill, Sleepy Hollow, and Tarrytown. And I'll let Joe speak in a second because he's spoken actually with the Peekskill building inspector about it. But what this would do is it would deal with the buildings that are in serious violation or have serious issues and just get transferred and the violations continue. In this case, the building department would have to be notified in advance. They would have to do an inspection. And if they are not so notified and the sale goes through, the building department, there would be significant fines to what would be the current owner of that building. And which, is, I think the fines that are listed in here, can go as high as $10,000. Because then the building would not have a valid CO. The building would still have all of its permits. And potentially, if it's a significant safety violation, the building may well have already been placarded and no tenants would be allowed in there anyway. So this would get these violations resolved in a manner which we frankly are unable to do it at this point now. It would require additional work by the building department, and Joe can also comment on that. But at least, Joe and I are of the view that it would provide another means to deal with those buildings where there are open violations. Clearly, if you have a building where there are no open violations, the inspection is simply an inspection. They see there's nothing there. And then the updated CO can be issued. The other thing that benefits with an updated CO is that if someone else goes to sell the property, they got a CO that's going to be dated as of 2021 or 2022 or whatever. And so all of the other issues that may have existed in the past about having to get predate letters or about having to legalize particular things would all be taken care of through this process. Joe, if you have anything to add, please.
No, thank you, Stuart. I think you've explained well. Yeah, I did speak to the building inspector for Peekskill and asked about how efficient it is with this law. He expressed, as in anything else, there's always, those few that is something a little different, and it's never 100% perfect. But overall, it's a lot better because it's allowed them the ability to correct these deficiencies in these houses, especially in 1 and 2 families where you do not gain access unless you're granted permission. In this case, if you're selling the home with this law, you would have to have the building department go in because you have to get a new C of O. So if there are any alterations that were done without proper permits, if it's being used as a multifamily home when it should only be a 2-family, before it gets transferred to the next owner, these violations would be corrected. And in the, I did ask the question, well, what do you do in the case when you have a home that would not essentially get a C of O because it has deficiencies that need attention and repair? And he said exactly the way Stuart explained it, is that they take money in escrow. It's understanding the transaction would go through. The idea is if you're going to be making these repairs, no one's going to be occupying the building while these repairs are being made. They pull a permit within a certain time allocated, so be it 4 weeks, 6 weeks after the transaction date. They're gonna, once they get their permit, they will be calling for those inspections, and essentially to close the permit, you would get a C of O anyway. And then at that point, then the building can be occupied. If the transaction is going to take place and the intention is that the new owner is immediately looking to have people occupy the building, then prior to the transaction, all the violations have to be cured. And you have to, the current owner would have to get that C of O before the date of the transaction. Yes, right now we do, we're requested to do predates in situations where homes do not have original C of Os and they request for predates. And the efficiency on that is, that's most of the time when we get the home into compliance because we're doing this particular inspection, which would essentially be the same thing as this inspection to get a C of O. The difference would be is that in the predate, it's only being done when it's being requested because the lender does not see an original C of O for the house. So we do them, but they're, not in every transaction. They may be in about 20% or 50% of the sales. And in this law, it would allow us to get into all of them. And then if a C of O is issued on this transaction and the home is sold next year, we really only have to go back to what we observed when we issued the C of O the last time. And anything prior to that would not be an issue any longer because that was all corrected when we issued the last C of O. yes, we understand that it means doing a lot more work. It does mean that, there's a lot more, there's going to be a lot more inspection and so forth. But I believe, even with that being said, that this would be a method for us to be able to deal with a lot of the ongoing issues that we have with the village, the way we have now with, how apartment units that have been created without permits and certificate of occupancies, alterations done in the homes without any of these permits taken. And often we have a lot of times where the new owner ends up always saying, well, I didn't do this, was the previous owner, I wasn't aware. This would satisfy all of that, because if they have to get a C of O, we'd be addressing it before the new owner ends up taking responsibility for it. So I think in the long run, I think that this is actually a positive step to have a measure in place for us to be able to start being able to get some of these homes in compliance.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I have some questions, some comments. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Stuart. And Stuart and I were actually talking about this a few weeks back, so I appreciate you bringing this back, Stuart, again. It's been a few years now. We haven't talked about this CFO portion of it. Stuart, I just had a couple quick questions that maybe Joe as well can help me out. And I do appreciate Laura Lee, our previous professional consultant, reach out. Is very helpful, because that was one of the questions that I had based on one of the conversations that Stuart and I had about a property to Lincoln, I want to say, that was going for sale and had several violations and didn't have a lot of the stuff, and that kind of popped up when I saw this back. So I appreciate that as clarified. I do have a question in regards to letter G, H, revocation of suspension of certificates. If the building inspector or an assistant building inspector determines that a certificate of occupancy or temporary or partial certificate was issued in error because of its incorrect. Can you explain that to me, Stuart? How would that happen? And what kind of errors we're talking about? Because if an homeowner obtains a C of O, for many years that person may think that he has a C of O, but a building inspector or an assistant building inspector can come and say, well, you got the C of O by mistake, that we have problems and you guys need to do this, this, and this. What does that entail itself?
I'm trying to think, because this has been the law for a bit. But basically, if you had a circumstance where it was discovered for some reason, let's assume that a CO was issued in error, that they had not gotten all their necessary permits. Let's say it's an electrical and they didn't, but for some reason, it turns out that, there was no CO, there was no electrical certification done, but a CO was issued. That CO is incorrect and should not have been issued. And the problem has to be rectified, because in order to do, if it's for electrical work, we require the electrical certification. If for some reason we didn't get it, but a CO was issued, either because an error from the village's end, or because there was information that was improperly provided, the document itself is incorrect, because the CO requires that all the work that is pursuant to a particular permit has been done and has been inspected, which is the second part of it. And if for some reason that has not occurred, you have an issue. You might have a situation where a CO might have been issued for a property that is, maybe it's listed as a 3 family, but it's always only been a 2. It's legally a 2. It's in the zone as a 2. It never received a variance to be a 3. That's a mistake, and that's an error. And those kind of COs, and in a circumstance like that, would need to be corrected. Joe, you might have more experience as to where that has come up.
Yeah, I mean, in instances where some of the third-party inspectors, let's say an electrical, to do an inspection, and he was not made aware that there was a sub panel somewhere in a crawl space that he didn't get to see. He issues a certificate. We assume the electrical is all complete, and then it was discovered that something that he needed to inspect was not. The electrician failed to bring it to his attention. We would have issued the C of O, but knowing now that there was something that needed additional inspection to be done, we'd have the right to say, well, that C of O is not going to be, it's going to be revoked until that inspection is done. Or the surveyor does a survey and we thought the deck that was built, that they're legalizing, met all the zoning setbacks, and then we find out that the surveyor was in error and now he needs a variance. We would have to revoke that C of O until they are zoning compliant. So often that has ever, these things happen, not really, but there could be an instance where that can happen, and to have that provision there would keep us without having to say, well, the electrical inspector was not told that he needed to inspect this, but now that we issued the C of O, we don't have any which way to, address that again. By having this in there, it leaves, it just leaves an ability for us to say, well, if something wasn't properly inspected, we can revoke that C of O until that's been inspected. And
Thank you.
I see it as a safety measure.
Okay. No, thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. I had another question in regards to, there was something in here about code enforcement that wasn't clear to me, but I'll find it and I'll probably email it to you, Stuart.
Okay.
Overall, I think on the violations, I'm okay with all that stuff. I have no, certificate of completions, Joe. What is the difference between certificate of completions and certificate of C of O's, please? And do we need a certificate of completion after if we adopt this law?
Well, some people call it the certificate of completion. We use a certificate of compliance as opposed to a C of O. It's usually when a permit is taken out for an installation, say, of a mechanical equipment, you take a building permit to install solar panels and the equipment. We wouldn't issue in the end a certificate of occupancy because ultimately you're not occupying the solar panels and the equipment. So we call it a certificate of compliance, that it complies with all the measures and standards for installation. The same thing with if somebody does boilers, removes oil tanks, installs a new oil tank, sheds that are, even though they're a storage shed and they're 300 square feet, which requires a permit, you don't occupy the shed, it's for storage of items. So we would give it a compliance sheet. By issuing a certificate of occupancy, we're essentially telling the people, sure, you now could go ahead and occupy that shed if you choose to. So we don't issue an occupancy. We only issue certificate of occupancies for work that's done where you are constructing spaces that you will occupy, bedrooms, living room, office space, recreation room. But anything by the state's definition of what is not habitable would get us a compliance certificate as opposed to an occupancy certificate.
Thank you, Joe. That's pretty much it. I'm in favor of support this law.
Thank you. So I just have a couple of food for thought. The intention of this is to make sure that we have a way, which we don't seem to be able to do today in any meaningful way, is to get people to fix what needs to be fixed. They sell a multi-family house, which is supposed to be a two-family, and they're turning it into three. The most often stated reason is, gee, I bought it like that. I just didn't know that it was supposed to be two. I don't understand zoning. et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, let's say that I believe 50% of them and 50% are lying. But still, some of them are truthful. I mean, that they didn't know. That it was something that was just there and, you know, they don't understand the differences here. Because it's not easy to understand zoning. So I get the intention of like, this is a point in a transaction where you could get people to comply. The issue for me is always about practicality from a resident point of view and the difference between capacity and capability. So you have the capability to manage this. You pass a law and then you have inspections and you do all the things line by line. But you don't really have the capacity. Your department doesn't have the capacity, in my opinion, as it stands right now, to manage this in volume. We've just had a tremendous influx of volume of sales. All sorts of stuff, because these C of Os are not just about two families that were turned into three. That's a big obvious one. And, you know, let's be honest, I'm a big proponent that we have overcrowded housing because of stuff that goes on, 4 bedrooms stuck into, you know, a basement and all that stuff and all those sort of things. But these C of Os also include lots of other things that are not, somebody, I think it was either Stuart or you, Joe, said, these are the big problem areas, but I don't know how you define big from small. Because my understanding of C of Os and everything else is that it doesn't separate by big and small. It's not like it's written that only things where apartments were added, or only things where solar panels were added, or it really involves a very long list of things that are included in that. And so I'm very concerned about capacity. Why am I concerned about capacity? Because people live somewhere and they want to sell a house. And it's a very stressful transaction. And they have to do 72 things. They have to pack up, they've got to like pay people, they've got to get lawyers, they have to have banks involved, they have to have all sorts of stuff. And they usually figure out 90 days is a long time, but guess what? It's like a blink of an eye when you actually go through that transaction. And they run out of money because some of these things could cost $5,000, $8,000, $15,000. They didn't count on that when they started this journey. And the inspector was on vacation for 2 weeks. You know, and the pandemic broke out, whatever. So they will lose their customer. They will lose money waiting around till things get done. And then I'm not trying to pick on anybody in particular, but it wouldn't be the first time that we did inspections, and I'm using the word we because we're all involved in this, and we didn't do it exactly the way it should have been. And it took another 2 weeks before something else was followed up and something else was done. And the clock ticking on these transactions is a big deal. And it becomes, to my mind, unfair to the consumer that our capacity issues play into this. So I have no problem with our capability and our intent. All good. I do have an issue with capacity, and our issues about passing laws that we don't then have the capacity to manage effectively, efficiently, and with fairness to the consumer. Because we're trying to solve a problem for the municipality, which is that over the many decades of our history, people have done stuff. And I'm going to be blunt and honest, they knew what they were doing when they were doing it, but when they come in front of us or other committees, they act very naive and innocent. I understand all that. Having said that, though, and I'll get to Lori Lee's issue in a minute, I'm just concerned. I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I'm really concerned about capacity of handling all this stuff. Can you speak to that?
I can address some of that. I noticed that you'll see that in transactions, we get a lot of FOIL requests. And most of them are from realtors. Realtors have now gotten adjusted to that they want to do a search on their own for these properties when the listing comes up, because they realize there may be things that their client is going to have to legalize and do not want to wait until they're a week away from a closing, so they're being proactive. With the law in effect, realtors will be aware that, you know, this is the procedure, this is the process. So I think they have a stake in it too. They're making a commission, so they want to make sure that this is going to go as smooth as possible. So I would hope that they would, knowing that this law is a law within the village of Ossining, and if you're going to sell real estate in Ossining, that you will get on this right away and be prepared for when you need a C of O. So if there's any things that are within the home that need to be corrected, legalized, they'll do it ahead of time and not wait to the last minute. I mean, as for capacity, yes, I mean, we do. I mean, Karen will, I guess, address this at a later date. We do have another assistant building inspector position that we did not fill this year. We're hoping to fill with the coming year with anticipation for these type of things that we're going to have as new laws that are going to need more capacity and more help, which is why I had requested to get an additional staff for this. And you're right, Mayor, that if you're going to implement laws, they're all well and good, but you have to have the capacity to enforce it. And we're trying to be proactive to be prepared for that. But I don't want to I don't want to say that because we have additional work to do and additional things, I don't want to have that put ahead of making sure that we are trying to improve the quality of housing, kind of get a hold of how these buildings are used. So it's never, I'm not going to put the amount of load of work that we have to do in front of what's the correct measures or the correct ways for us to do it. You know, and we're, like you said, we would try our best. We're going to try to offer 6 days a week of inspections. If we get another assistant building inspector, they're going to be here working on Saturdays. So with the increased capacity on that, we would hope to be able to handle this, because I believe in the long run, it may be a lot of work at this point, but down the road, it's going to be a lot easier, and we won't be dealing with these problems of, you know, trying to, you know, figure out what occurred in this house and what's legal and what's not. And, you know, if we can clean up some of these properties, I think the next transaction and so forth would be a lot smoother.
Right, so again, totally understand the intention, which is what you're speaking to. We can talk about timing, because maybe you should get the person in first and then you start activating the law, and not the other way around, but we can discuss that. So another question for you, Joe, have you guys considered, so the intention is to fix the problems, right? And the intention is to do it at exactly the point of selling, because that's when you've got everybody at the table. Okay. Is there an opportunity? So I would imagine a scenario where somebody's trying to sell and has probably bought something somewhere else. I would imagine that's not an uncommon transaction. So they've got money coming and going, and most people, they're pretty much on the edge. Not everybody, but most of them are sort of buying and selling, whether they're retiring, whether they're going bigger, whatever. Is there an opportunity to still meet your intentions, right? By saying to someone, look, these 5 things are outstanding. This is, you know, this 3 bedrooms shouldn't be here. It should be 1 bedroom, whatever. We're going to get an estimate. It costs $28,000 to fix this. Is there an opportunity to say, we will demand, because of timing, that you put in, or your buyer will be told about this, puts money into escrow, and you have 1 year to fix it, so that their transaction. So for me, this is about the resident and consumer. That's what I'm thinking about right now. Not about our needs, but the needs of the specific residents involved. Is there an opportunity to create a financial account for the village that says, as a matter of fact, that says, we know it costs about, we may not be exactly 100% right. There's an administration fee of $500 because it's taking time of our staff. And frankly, you know, we're doing something different here. And you can't fix it. And you may not have the cash, but the buyer has been made aware. The buyer wants to purchase this, he or she will have to pay $28,500. The money has to be put by one of the parties into an account with us, and you have exactly 12 months to fix all these violations, or there is something attached to it. The reason I bring this up is because you're allowing someone to buy out of doing the work. Why do I say that? Because I've lived in Westchester long enough to know that there are peaks and valleys in capacity of workers. You have every intention of fixing the plumber, but there ain't no plumber available for 3 months around here, depending on the economy. So you're asking people to do things that even if they want to, they're not really able to in a timely way, and they've got a buyer on their hook. They've got a buyer who wants to pay them, and they're probably buying somewhere else. So I'm simply coming up with a solution that says, can an individual say, you think it costs 28, I'll get 3 bids, it's $28,000. I'll put the money, or the buyer puts the money, because the buyer wants it. And they're like, okay, it's another $28,000. I can negotiate the price, right? Because it's just about money. And you're giving me X number of months to fix the windows, to get rid of this bedroom. Because your intention, Joe and Stuart, is to fix the problem. And all I'm looking at is a solution to fix a problem so that both parties walk out of it and go, we can fix the problem. Because what I'm concerned about is people saying, I can't afford to sell because I needed to make this much money in order to buy my, I mean, this is what happens realistically in real estate transactions. And if we make it unaffordable for people to sell their property because of the timing issue, not anything else, not only do we have a whole bunch of angry people, but it's almost really not practical. Okay, even in this economy where people can sell a house in minutes, it's also not practical. Am I sort of, do people understand what I'm?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just throwing it out there. Meet the intention, using you guys, not only the intention, the law, and adding in capabilities, which you guys have, but taking care of the issue of the, I'm like leaning over with my hands over here, leading into the capacity issue where all parties get to do what they need to do by buying out. And I'm not worried that the 3 bids came to 28 and it really cost 29, or it cost 27, and that's irrelevant to me. It has to be within the ballpark, and that would make everybody happy. My goal is to make people happy as they're coming into our village and as they leave the village, and then we take care of these huge problems we have with these multifamilies that are growing like blockbusters, which we all know exists. Nobody's just kidding anybody here. How does that feel? How does that sound?
Mayor, there's a provision that while it's on the, generally, it would be the seller's obligation to take care of this. They can agree in their contract that this becomes the purchaser's responsibility. And they can put money in escrow to take care of that. So that's provided for in here. So if the seller says, basically, I can't do it, and the purchaser goes, okay, I'll do it, but I've got to put, X amount of dollars in escrow, that's fine, as long as it gets taken care of. That's already in here.
I get it, but you have to then go into those people. If they put it in with the village, it will not be an option of like, oh, I didn't get to it. Like it'll get done, which is what we want in a timely way, because their money isn't sitting in an escrow account in a bank where they promised that I'll do it. Like, so I got money to do my windows when I moved in. I was supposed to do them, and there's nothing inspection-wise wrong with them. I didn't like them. And but that doesn't mean that I had to do them at exactly the right time, but that's with the village. It means you have to do, because the point that Joe is making is we want people to fix what should be fixed. And how do we control that? Well, you control it if the escrow is sitting with the village, and we know that you've got X number, and you can't tell me you don't have the money to do it
Yeah.
because we have it. I mean, is that like different?
Can I chime in?
Please.
Basically, a purchaser should be able to inherit whatever the violations are and set an escrow, but they can only inherit it one time on that property. So a year from now, he wants to sell the property. If he hasn't taken care of it, he's not getting the CO. Is there a provision for that? There should be a limitation on that. And my other question is, you're going to be inspecting every purchase that goes through this village. Is there a fee for these inspections?
I suspect there would be. We haven't put that in, but
We do have an
Absolutely.
application. I thought we do have an application for a certificate of occupancy, Joe.
I think this would be a
do.
different phase.
there is a CO fee.
Yeah.
So this applies to every residential real estate transaction in the village.
Yes.
Even a simple single-family home, nobody's done anything to it.
You'd be surprised how many single-family homes have violations.
Oh, no.
I
Without a
do
doubt.
remember someone saying to me, right before they closed on their house, there was a problem with the deck. It turns out it was built on there and that without a permit. And it held up the entire sale. So I mean, if you can be proactive about this, I mean, you know, and take it, you know, it might actually save people trouble, but
We're at a,
Well, we all agree on the intentions. The intentions are, we all agree on that we need to do this. That's
right,
not-
we're at a market right now where, you know, and it could change any day. It's a seller's market.
Right.
And people are buying and selling houses, but I personally don't have a problem with them, you know, and again, like Stuart said, it could be in a contract, but you're gonna pass that over and the building inspector is gonna say, okay, you're gonna take care of this, but we still need to, you know, in the agreement, there needs to be an escrow set up, right? But like I said, if this person goes to sell it again, we gotta make sure that it just doesn't, they pass the buck to the next purchaser. It could only be a one-time deal that they could get this pass, so to speak, and inherit the problems, but by the time they go to sell a house, and they may not sell a house, and the problems may stay there till these people die in the house. But if they do intend on selling it again, they will not, you know, we need to make sure that we just don't give them this inheritance again to go to the next purchaser.
I think what they're doing is not even giving them one-time shot. They're stopping it now. There's
Right.
no-
Right, but
They're
I-
stopping it right at the get-go.
Well, there's also a liability, like you can, if there's a consideration of allowing a transaction to go through for certain, I wouldn't be in agreement to, so we find out that, you know, the current owner made an illegal apartment in the basement and now they want to sell it and the new owner is gonna take on that violation. It would have to be a measure in place to say, well, that's not going to be occupied at all. It doesn't mean you're going to deal with it in the meantime for 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. You're going to continue to use that space because it's not been inspected. We don't have electrical inspections. We have no C of O for that space. It may not meet even you know, the use in that zoning district. So, you know, to say we're going to let that transaction go through and let the next owner deal with that and give them an allotted time, within that allotted time, something could happen. There could be a fire, there could be an injury. And now the fact that we've actually been there and recorded that it's existing there because we've seen it, I would say that we would not be allowed to have the current owner, the new owner, be able to use that space. If we're talking about something like, you know, they changed out their windows, it's not going to be a problem, you know, where it's a life safety issue. But I think if there's a life safety issue involved in it, it would have to be something in place that would not allow the new owner to be able to use that space.
Oh, I agree 100% with that, Joe. I'm just saying, you know, a single family residence, it's mostly you're running the mill stuff, or if it is a deck or, you know, something that's, or whatever it may be, you know, life safety issues that I couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah, and that's why I asked what big means. So it was, I like, we have to define some of this stuff.
So I think that it is possible to define life safety versus things that were just not done with the appropriate permits. I do want to address the capacity issue. So as Joe mentioned, we do have the ability to hire another assistant code and assistant building inspector, and likely we will have opportunity. I think we'll be able to hire additional code enforcement officer going into next year. I think that it's really, really important that regardless that we figure out what we need to do to solve the problem, and then work into, Mayor, to your point, make sure that we can address that capacity. I think the biggest challenge is, and my concern about not going forward, when you have a situation where for many, many years, through no fault of anybody on this board, through no fault of any of the current staff, things have been neglected, you're left with an enormous back pile of things. And we have to really be somewhat aggressive in getting on top of that. And I can't think of any area where we get more complaints next to sanitation issues than this particular area. So perhaps too, in conjunction with this, we can look at, similar to what we did with the building inspections, is look at ways to incentivize people to come forward before they get to this point, and do public education to the community about the need to make sure this is all done in advance of sale. And then figure out some way, whether it's you know, some sort of incentive or no fee for an application if you're coming forth proactively, something like that to incentivize, so that you have that dual ability to get on top of the problem more quickly, but also not appear punitive or too like you're trying to put too many obstacles in front of the way of people who may or may not have even known that they're in violation of something.
So, you know, it is interesting you say that, Karen, and Mayor, I agree with one of the things that you said.
I know what
We
you're gonna
talked,
say.
there's a couple of things that I want to say. So we talked about capacity many years ago when actually I brought up the registration portion of this. And at that time, the board felt that, or the majority of the board felt that we didn't have the capacity on the building department to take that into the next level. And then we talked about the same problem when, or the same issue, I want to say, when we remap the landlord tenant portion, and that was one of the recommendations at the time. And so at some point, I would like to bring that back. No, right now. That's not.
3-2 vote each
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, so, but now we're talking about something that I've been talking about for years. And is the amnesty program that Westchester has. And I have spoken to the building department there. I have spoken to the planners there. I had situations where I have been involved in working in particular case with that as well. So, and I think I had mentioned this to Joe before. Please talk to them. I'm not going to tell you exactly what they're doing, but there's a program that was established, I want to say maybe 7-8 years ago, maybe longer. There's a couple laws that revised it twice so far. I think they tweaked it because they found a couple things that they weren't working properly. Obviously, there's always issues. Nothing is perfect, sure, but I think it has helped Westchester a lot with an amnesty program, and I think that's what I'm hearing from you, Karen, in regards to that. I had also, again, I'm going to pitch in. I'm going to put my 2 cents on this. Many years back, I paid and I designed with the help. I paid for the information that went out, but I had the help from the planning department, the building department at the time, and the assessor's office to have a workshop for the community to kind of inform. I have sent that information in the past to staff, and if we're going to be using something like that, maybe that could be used as a template to do this kind of education to the public, and having the ability of having the Zoom, it'd be better. So hopefully that will, and I know the capacity, and I know we have talked about, Karen and I have talked about enforcement and having somebody else in there, an assistant building inspector as well. So I think hopefully some of that stuff will be able to help, not fully, but it will help. Just keep in mind that last week, was it last week, Stuart, or the week before, we talked about a policy change on the building department and how things were should be being addressed. If someone has a violation on their property, they try to ask for a building permit. They need to clean the violations first. So that is a policy that is already established on the building department that I think it will help alleviate some of the stuff that we're talking about right now. That's sort of, I think, in a way, the proactive portion of it. But I think we could do more than that. I think we can educate the public more. So I'll leave it like that.
Okay. Yeah, the amnesty, I knew you were going to talk about the amnesty program, because there's 2 ways to look at it. First, you tell people, and maybe you get 10%, maybe you get 20%. You're not going to get 100%. The 10%, 20 are going to look at themselves and say, look, I don't have to pay the fees. I'm going to take care of this stuff now. Let me just clean this up now because I want to sell my place within the next year or 2. And when I have a buyer, it's not the time for me to sit around about a deck or the garage that somebody put in and never got some, whatever that is, or that. So you get maybe 10 or 20%, but 10 or 20% is huge. That's huge. That gets rid of that part of the pyramid. The other 80%, they probably know they really shouldn't have done it, or they did it when they bought it. They paid part cash, they did this, whatever they did. they're not gonna come. Okay, so what? When we get 10-20%, I'm gonna consider that a huge win. And then we go into lots of fees and the punitive way. But it is a thing. I mean, look, with guns, it works. They work with a lot of stuff where you give people a limited time. I like the workshop idea a lot. I think that we've gotten much better than we used to because of Zoom and saying to people, look, folks, this is what we're gonna do. Here are some times. I think that works the same. Westchester uses it pretty well. It's a good investment, I think. So I'm okay with it. So where we are, I guess, Stuart, is you came to us with not an update. I'm trying to understand where we are for next week out of this conversation.
The board has questions, so that obviously the legislation is not prepared to go forward at this point. So that's fairly simple, and we'll have to come back and represent to the board.
But I do feel we're closer.
I know, I actually, Mayor, I'm not sure if we are, because there's a lot of,
Questions?
when Karen mentioned the issue of defining life safety, then you get into a whole issue. For example, if someone has, I just got a call from someone, they're concerned because they got an OTR because their basement was not legalized, but they didn't, and they thought it was taken care of by the prior owner. It was never done. Now, they don't live in the basement, but the bottom line is that it is now, it has electrical and everything like that. Theoretically, that's a life safety issue. And that's the kind, so defining these things and doing the things that you mentioned, Mayor, we'll have to go back and
Well,
work.
maybe it isn't closer, but it felt closer. I guess I felt good.
I wasn't trying to overcomplicate it. I apologize.
No, but you also, to Stuart's point, there may need to be a list. You may have to say that a deck is not, like, you need to maybe have some parameters. The goal here is to get rid of 10 to 15 to 20% of the pieces and get them out of the way, and then deal with the other 80% through the law that we just talked about. I think that would be more effective. It would be more effective during bad markets and good markets. The middle ground markets, it really won't change one way or the other. Anyway, that's just something to work on.
Very good.
Thank you. So, as you all know, we've been working on the downtown revitalization initiative. And I want to just take the board through a very brief presentation about the process, and also discuss, we had sent the board a list of the projects that we are going to be putting forth within the narrative, because basically the DRI is a narrative of things that we might do, and things that we would be ready to do and supportive, and there would be community support to do should we win the DRI initiative grant. So when we win, we're working very hard on that. And I also have Valerie Monastros here as well, and working with us to finalize the submission. But we have a short time frame to do this, and it's going to be an iterative process, but we want to make sure everybody, the public and the board, is well aware of our plans. So just briefly, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative is a comprehensive approach to boosting local economies, transforming communities into vibrant neighborhoods where the next generation of New Yorkers will want to live, work, and raise a family. And each of the state's 10 regional economic development councils, REDCs, will solicit applications, and they will choose one of 2 downtowns within their region that are right and ready for revitalization, and they really have the potential to become a magnet for redevelopment and job creation and greater economic and housing diversity and opportunity. The applications for the current round must be submitted by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, September 15th. We're actually trying to do this so we can get it a day early to make sure that there are no technology glitches, as sometimes happen when a lot of people are submitting at the same time. The 5th round of the DRI, the RDCs may nominate 2 downtowns. They didn't give this last year, so there's an extra pot of money. And that would be for $10 million awards, or they are offering an opportunity to award $20 million The selection criteria includes physical environment, past investment, future potential, recent and impending job growth, and support, community support for global vision, and very important readiness, that these are essentially shovel-ready or near shovel-ready projects that the municipality is already committed to. Based on its size, we'll be requesting $10 million. I think the threshold for a $20 million never before awarded grant would be challenging for a village. There are some goals that they're guiding us through this process for the DRI. So the goal of the initiative is to create an attractive and desirable downtown with a strong sense of place and identity. Important is attracting new businesses, including Main Street businesses that create a robust mix of shopping and dining and entertainment opportunities, as well as service options for residents and visitors, and job opportunities for a variety of skills at a variety of different levels. Enhancing public spaces for arts and culture events is also key. And those would be for things that serve the community, but also draw people to the community. Building a diverse population with residents and workers supported by complementary and diverse housing and employment opportunities. Diversity, as you see, is very key. Growing the local property tax base, which is an important thing for Ossining, an important thing for most communities, but something that we've been looking at quite seriously for some time now. Providing amenities that support and enhance downtown living and quality of life. And then, of course, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, fostering more walkable communities, more public transit, non-carbon fueled alternatives, just decarbonization of energy along with or in conjunction with development projects. And installation of on-site renewable energy generation and electric vehicle charging is a component too, in conjunction with the projects that are being proposed. The majority of DRI funds will be used for capital projects that again will be transformative to the downtowns and in ways that benefit current residents and also are looking towards the future. So the four categories of project categories are new development and or rehabilitation of existing downtown buildings. And that could be for mixed use commercial or public uses, visible functional impact on the downtown, serving, something that serves as an anchor or something very catalytic in the community that would spur other business opportunities and development. Again, employing decarbonization strategies and working with the state's goals on climate leadership and the Climate Protection Act. Public improvement projects, those include infrastructure projects such as broadband and communications connectivity, green infrastructure, street improvements, and transportation, signage, upgrades to parks and plazas, public art installation, and other things that improve public quality of life, interest in the community, and contribute to downtown revitalization. They also, the DRI can also fund a revolving grant fund or loan fund. This would be designated by an entity that would be designated by the village that would manage to undertake a range of smaller downtown investment loans for grants. A lot of it could be about supporting the arts or improving physical spaces, facade improvements, things like that. And this fund is typically capped at about $600,000. And the projects can also fall in the branding and marketing category as well. This is a map of the area that we're proposing. It is quite similar to what was proposed in the last few go-rounds of the DRI. It's important to have a district that is where you can activate the funding in a really synergistic way and build a story of connectivity. So we have focused on this area still recognizing that we have other areas in the community that are important and, but with the understanding that improvements here will activate improvements in those communities as well, whether it's Croton Avenue or other business districts and neighborhoods throughout the village. In terms of the projects that we are recommending, most of them fall under the category of new development and or rehabilitation of existing buildings. So we are talking about, the board has talked about issuing an RFP for Market Square and post office lots. We are already hearing information from the community, so we know, and plus the past studies that we've done, including a village square and a public space is really key, maintaining the character of the community. So these are things we're putting into the narrative that we're in the process of writing. Further enhancements to the 30 Water Street mixed income, mixed use development. We're working with Bill Walter for some suggestions on things above and beyond what has already been agreed to with that project. That could be enhancements where we get additional monies. And again, similarly for any development project, a public component, public access component, like a Market Square, is something that is really right for a public-private partnership initiative, because it takes some of the burden of perhaps lower density that would affect the developer and allows for the funding of that initiative, that public benefit. We're talking about a business incubator or an incubator, but I think it really should be business incubator at 200 Main Street. I think that's really a general term. We're in the process of soliciting information from the community to get more ideas and make sure that we're cognizant of community engagement. But some of the things that we know have been recommended for that building, whether it's a tasting kitchen or restaurants, things like different things that could be in that building. Now that, again, it's more ready for sale and development because it is being remediated, and ultimately with the road diet, there will be parking adjacent to it. We've been talking about capital improvements at the computer center. We know that, you see the pictures of what we did, and already the pool and the gymnasium are ready for upgrades. It seems like yesterday, but it's actually been a few years now. But we've never really invested in the rest of the center. We know it has a lot more potential. We know that there's a lot more we could do if we had more money to do it. Another thing that we're looking at, where we've applied for a grant to consolidate, to look at consolidating firehouses, and we know that we have historic firehouses that are located on Main Street that have well served their function in the past, but are more challenged to do so now because of their location. They are ripe for adaptive reuse, and with a nod to their legacy too. So think of Ossining Volunteer Firemen's Museum, Firehouse Museum, or a firehouse themed restaurant or pub with an art space. So lots of possibilities there as well. And Sing Sing Prison Museum, this is something that with added funds, we could help support in some way, providing some money towards their capital needs as they're going forward with that project, which is also very important to the future of Ossining. Other public improvement projects include, we've talked about a Village Pier extension. We have, working with Gareth Cupham and his agency, have done a study and a design of the pier. Executing the pier and bringing it to completion is an expensive project, one that would require some support and funding to bring to fruition. But the value of a pier would mean that we could have boats docking here, transient docks for visitors of the waterfront and the waterfront restaurants, as well as schooners that may be delivering goods and services to our community, and sunset cruises. Streetscaping along Main Street and Station Plaza, we know is needed, and we've done some of it already, but there's so much more we could do. Museum in the Streets reboot is another thing that we think is unique to Ossining that could use some, could be enhanced greatly with more funding, as well as public broadband, which we know particularly during the pandemic, was badly needed here. And in terms of a grant or revolving loan fund, we envision using that for facade improvements. If you look at our downtown area, you look at some people, some of the businesses have been able to really invest, and some not as much. And if we can help those out so that we have a real continuity, look and feel for the village, I think that would go a long way to making our business owners and property owners happy, as well as our residents and people who are coming to visit here. In terms of branding and marketing, we're talking about there's things that we can do to really call out the hidden gems of Ossining, whether it's our double arches, our Sing Sing Hill walkway, our other arches at the riverfront, or the Old Croton Aqueduct. There's a lot of things here. There's a lot of things that can't be replicated anywhere else that are really unique. And by pulling them out and giving them greater resonance, I think we'll provide an opportunity to have people visit here that maybe never thought of coming to Ossining before. And investing and living here too. So we are looking to do a lot of community engagement. We've already started. We've done 2 virtual sessions. We held one in English and one in Spanish on August 12th. And despite we had a good turnout at the English language one, we did not have a turnout at the Spanish language one, but we have, as part of these engagement sessions, we did do a presentation similar to the one I'm doing tonight about the DRI. They are on my YouTube channel. We've been pushing those out so people know about it and can view them. Our online survey, I think we're at about 200 responses so far. We've started calling through that. We're pushing that out through the end of, through August 31st. We wish we could do longer, but this grant is due on the 15th of September. And we are starting to call through that and identify the common themes. We will be at Market Square, as the mayor mentioned earlier, from 9 to 11 a.m. on Saturday. And we will have boards with these projects on them and lots of stickers, and we'll be there to answer your questions, and we will be able to converse in English and Spanish on this project. So we look forward to seeing people at the Market Square, at the farmers market. In terms of next steps and ensuring that we have time to review and submit this on time, we are in the process of compiling community feedback, as I've said, on the online survey. And that compilation will be going on through the 8th of September. We are shooting to get the first draft to the Board of Trustees, and we want to give it to members of the Downtown Fund Development Council by next Wednesday, September 1st. Subsequent to that, we will collect responses from the board and any comments that members of the DDFC may have, as well as looking at the compilation of community feedback and incorporate that into the second draft between September 1st and September 8th. On September 8th, we will report out at the work session on the community feedback so that we have people know that their voices were heard and we'll be able to qualify the information as best we can. Again, this is not this is a qualitative study, but we are finding common themes, so we'll report back on that. And we will look to have a final draft to the BOT on September 10th. Solicit your, there'll be a little bit work for you guys. Our turnaround time is not that great here, so we'll have to turn that around. And ideally, we'd like to submit before the end of the day on September 9th, September 14th, thus making the deadline. So with that, I think I've taken you through pretty much everything. I tried to do it in under 10 minutes. And
this was also sent to us, by the way, for those of you who may or may not have gotten it a couple days ago, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes, but just another touch point with the community as well. So
Okay, comments?
See, would any of this include improving the downtown intersection? No, okay.
That's actually a great question. That
That's,
didn't
that's
even make the
actually,
list.
that's one of my questions in there, and I was gonna start with a roundabout question, but
No, no, no.
I'm glad that, I'm glad you actually
I'm
bring
not
that up.
budget, but the fact is, we still have an issue with that
That
intersection, and we
intersection.
need changes, and we need improvements.
Well, we did discuss that.
And
And what,
We have-
we can incorporate that. We can incorporate that, but knowing that it is somewhat sensitive subject that, and we don't necessarily have a concrete plan for that.
That's not necessarily true, because we do have drawings. Forget about the roundabout.
Yeah.
Right.
Forget about
That's
that.
right, other
There's a plan, and there's actually, I think I want to say more than 50 to 60% drawings already done for
If
that
that is
particular
something
intersection.
the board wants to bring forward, it is something that we could include. Valerie, I know we had talked about that. So I don't know if you have a perspective. You were around, I think, some of the onset of these discussions.
Well, just
Right,
so
and-
we're, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, I think we discussed that, if we were to put that project in, it would have to be that that the village board wanted to move forward with either, upgrading the existing, intersection, or installing the roundabout, as opposed to submitting a grant and having a
No.
project either or.
No, I think the point is that this board is not as interested in the roundabout there. I actually like roundabouts, I'm just not sure that's the right spot. But I wouldn't say, Manny, well, so it was always like, and I don't know, Valerie, if you're around for that. Hi, by the way, you and I actually have only met once. It's like, I feel like I know you because I've seen your name on so many things. It was a discussion about fixing that intersection. It's a weird intersection.
Yes.
It's a weird angle. It's like a 5-way intersection, but not really, because that 5th lane is like to the side. We all know it. We've all driven through that. So there were a few discussions. I was a newbie to the board, but there were a few discussions. So it was like, let's fix this intersection, because those poles and cones are bad. And once that went, hey, why don't we do a roundabout? There was discussion about that's what New York State is pushing for and all that, and that went to the roundabout. But there was a real conversation about fixing that intersection, because those poles are really temporary. But I would like to say that there's also an opportunity here, post-COVID, which is in front of the deli, which if you park in front of that deli, it's really difficult to get out. There might be an opportunity, the way we looked at the road diet, to add in maybe some extra sitting area for the local restaurants to have, or for people to have coffee. Like, it could be like that intersection plan, because Paul looked at it more as an engineer. What would it cost to replace these lights for modern lights? What would it cost to put in, the crosswalk? Nobody asked him to say, look at the intersection and look at it as a way, what would it look like if we parked like bikes there, like electric bikes? What would it like if we had a plant, a little garden for people to sit there, maybe a pet garden, like nobody asked them to do that. People said, can you fix the intersection? It's outdated and it needs to be fixed. So yeah, there are drawings, but is this, I guess the question is to both of you, Valerie and to village manager, Jaime, whoever's involved, is this an opportunity to revisit that intersection, starting with fixing and going to improving?
So the way I would put that is, it's really about projects that are fleshed out and vetted, that the community is engaged in. So one of the things, and this was our concern, is that even though there may be plans, it still really hasn't been from the board. It hasn't,
Right.
So to that end, though, we did talk about, when we talked about streetscaping, I mean, we're thinking about things that we've done in the past, whether it's planting flowers or things, or tree wells, but there's really more substantive streetscaping that we can do. And we could work streetscaping into a narrative about that would address some of the issues at the 5 corners in conjunction with maybe other projects that would be coming, because if we do the RFP for the Market Square and post office sites, that addressing the safety of that intersection could be part of that as well. So we could talk about it in conjunction with that. And that, one of the things that we did want to talk is of ways to make outdoor dining more of a permanent feature. So what would be ways to allow for permanent parklets that are not just with Yodocs and things that, so that is something that we did discuss. And that's something that we're trying to call out from the surveys and things.
And I'm just, my concern is like, we've talked about it, not necessarily all of us, because some of you weren't on the board, but that intersection is the center. It's like this, I call it the second center. It's the center in the downtown. Up the hill is the center of the entire village where the state Route 9 cuts through. So we have like these two major sort of centers where lots of roads go in. And on Saturdays, you see all the couples, young couples that moved in with the kids and the grandparents. So I would love for that intersection to be just fixed and done. But if we could do a little bit better than that, that would be
It would just be
fantastic.
ironic to win $10 million and at the end of it still have those candlesticks that sitting in the road.
So this is an exciting moment for us that we have an opportunity here. And, Valerie, I think you brought Valerie in for your expertise in a lot of this. So if you could help us, it would be more exciting to be able to somehow incorporate a major improvement in the middle of our community when the population is growing and more people are walking and we'd like to bring businesses in. I just feel like it's an opportunity right now.
So I would suggest then submitting that as a project and specifically stating that you're going to upgrade the intersection. You can talk a little bit about the pilot program that changed Spring Street from a one-way to a two-way, and that it's, that intersection needs to be improved upon. We're going to have to write it you're going to have to write the project in a way that the plans are pretty much done and they're ready to be implemented, knowing I understand that you'll need to go through some of those iterations. Just for the board is aware that even when they do have a planning team come in, the design work is limited usually. So it will be, you will have to probably engage, either Paul or, another consulting firm to sort of finalize those plans and also provide cost estimates throughout the process.
Hey Valerie, nice seeing you. And not just me watching town board meetings, but actually the village board meeting. So no, and I agree with you. And again, thanks Dana, because that what Karen was going over at the presentation, that was one thing that I was hoping to actually you bring that up. So we do have a budget for those, obviously, a couple of years back need to be updated in regards to numbers, in regards to updating those drawings. I'm a little, my recollection, and I guess I could always go back and see if I have the PDFs, but I know we did have some landscape, public
He
landscape
did,
now.
yeah, he did.
So we can obviously enhance that portion of it.
Yes.
Kind of go from there. So I'm 100% in favor of adding this project. One thing that I do want to ask you, I'm not sure that you have more questions.
Nope,
You sure?
that was
Okay.
something that popped into my head.
Oh, great. Thanks for bringing that
Thanks.
up.
So, Karen, you talked about projects that we haven't talked in public for a couple of years, or we just haven't talked to. 200 Main Street. So let me kind of understand that. Why is 200 Main Street on the list? Because so we do have a grant to remediate the building, and the only way for us to get the grant is because we need to sell that project. We need to sell the building, and now it's being part of the DRI. So help me understand this and a little bit better.
So the actually 200 Main Street in the 2019 DRI was positioned as the anchor project of the 2019 DRI. So we've evolved that project forward, and I do believe that some of the DRI and the consolidated funding application are all done through Regional Development Council. So there's an awareness of this and the progress that we're making. So the DRI would give us the additional funding if we wanted to take some of that funding and further remediate that building and fit it up for something that would be right for our community that we would want to see. We're talking about some sort of business incubator where we can really I think the idea for that building was always something that was somewhat community-based, but also served as an attraction. So whether it was a Taste of New York restaurant or a teaching kitchen restaurant that had multiple components and different opportunities for job training and job creation and fine dining, things like that. So it would be furthering that concept. And in what is really important to securing the funding is establishing a vision, a consistent vision that's supported by the community that then is, we're making traction and moving forward.
Is it gonna go back on the tax rolls under that scenario?
It would go back on the tax rolls, yes.
And I think that's the key. So all of this that you discussed, when you say a community kitchen, that doesn't sound like a private business.
It could be, I think that the teaching kitchen concept was initiated by a private developer who had an idea to do sort of I forget the original concept, but it wouldn't be a community, it wouldn't be a nonprofit would necessarily, it would be a for-profit entity and it would be a for-profit component of it.
Do a
So it'd be a
satellite,
taxable-
satellite of the Hyde Park Culinary Institute in there.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's, the bottom line is, and I think the other grant actually said, it has to go to the tax roll. So it could be, it can't be a nonprofit because then it won't go to a tax
I
roll.
think
Well, we
it's
have to
just simply
sell
has
it.
to sell it.
we have to
Just
sell,
simply
we
has
have to sell it.
Yeah.
It could go, it could, look, there are public-private partnerships that still are, if you look at something like a Grayston Bakery or something like that, where you have a component that is retail-based, it could do that. Ideally, I think that, we want to consider the pros and cons of any initiative based on the tax potential, because we are one of the imperatives here too, diversifying the tax base and using the tax burden. So those would be important considerations when looking at that. But
That's, I think it's still not clear to me exactly how will that help, obviously. So, because as the mayor said, look, you guys know that I wasn't really in favor. I wanted to keep that building and try to utilize it within that. That's not the case what's happening right now. So I do want that building now where we are. I want that building to go back in tax rolls.
that's fine.
We can work with it, because I remember talking to Maddie in regards to the grant, we cannot have a public-private relationship because of that within itself. So I don't think it's fair for us to talk about that at all.
Yeah, I'm not
Anything-
saying,
yeah,
I'm
no,
not
no,
suggesting
no.
that we do
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
think the strategy should be to put on the
Okay,
tax rolls.
Okay,
So that's the intent of the concept that we're
So-
talking about. with this
so you
private
brought up
group.
something that I was gonna ask, because some of this stuff, and I will have to go back, because I don't remember from the last application, how many of the projects that we did half last time are still on this application?
So, several of them are still on because most of that, we've had significant movement in advancing them. So, in the original, and I think the last few proposals, we talked about developing the DPW site. That's now happening. The RFP for Market Square and for the post office site. The board has said recently that they'd like to do that soon. So we are looking, so again, we've made progress. The Route 9 road diet, which was not really identified as a specific project that would be funded necessarily through the DRI because it's slightly outside of the district, would have huge impacts. So the fact that that's an investment that the village is making will bode well. The other things that we're talking about, I think a little bit differently than have been talked about in past proposals, is really talking about we have a much stronger story of implementation and working against a consistent vision now than we've had in the past. So if you look at all the projects that we're doing collectively, all the priority projects they all really focus on activating downtown, increasing connectivity between the waterfront, Main Street, and the rest of the community to further activate those communities. So most of the projects have been talked about. This is the first time where we could actually say they're going forward.
So I like everything that I'm hearing. What is the anchor project? Because you talked about 200 Main Street being the anchor project last time. What is the anchor?
That was
project?
positioned, I think that this is something, so, we're in a little bit of we have some options for anchor projects. We have a couple of anchor projects, but I think that in telling the story and getting the feedback will help hone that a little bit more. Again, we're in this weird position of having the basis of a story, but we're really waiting for some community feedback and obviously the input from the board tonight to hone that. I think that there's 4 really major projects here and other projects that are really support and work in a synergistic way. So some sort of landmark business that serves that can serve as an attraction and a really unique business at the 200 Main Street gives you something that draws from the top of Main Street. And now as you're doing the road diet, really gives you that stop and pause moment where you can park, get out and walk. The revitalization of the and redevelopment of the Main Street lots, I think is also critical and a linchpin project as well. Because you have the ability to do things in a different way, particularly with public-private dollars, in the sense that you can provide the public amenities. I mean, people like really, like you can't build something, what's going to happen to the farmer's market? Well, a farmer's market, John Zeltzman would be the first one to say it can be anywhere. So it doesn't have to be in a parking lot. But that idea of that market square, that community, that village square, that part is really important. The other thing too is that there's more things that are coming into that may be more viable in the marketplace than they were even a few years ago. So the idea of a boutique hotel is actually something that is becoming more of a trend for communities like Ossining. The idea of makers apartments, like artist type lofts or maker space lofts with areas to work and display wares on the ground floor is a great complement to a village square type thing. So that also becomes like a really attractive focal point. The DPW site provides a level of affordability as it catalyzes revitalization in that area and this continuation of Sing Sing Hill. And I think the other really important piece is that funding for the community center for all the things that we talked about as we've been talking about what the potential is there, activating that potential and really creating a community center that is state of the art and is done in the style that the library was done, where we have this really remarkable community feature. So I think that we have more than one anchor, but I think that they all work together so synergistically and so complementary that it creates a strong story.
Right, and I would just want to note that you don't necessarily have to have an anchor project because of the fact that the state really is looking for an area that has more than $10 million worth of projects, right? So that once you go through this public process and you identify the projects, the state will ultimately come in and they will identify where they want their funding to go to and which projects. That being said, what they're really looking for is they invest $10 million, but it's not just $10 million of investment. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it ends up being a $50, $60 million investment overall once all those projects are implemented.
Thank you. I have no questions. Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I think, fingers crossed, basically. I think this would be changing my entire downtown. I would have actually said, the waterfront in a more masterful way is an anchor, and it starts there and then works its way up, working its way down. You know how I feel about the community center. It's another hub of activity for all generations. Connecting that would be huge. I don't know, 200 Main Street just sits in a place, so the physicality of it makes it sort of important, especially since we're not. But honestly, community center, waterfront, would be huge. And the Simpson Museum eventually. I mean, I'm just seeing that it's not a huge waterfront. I mean, even I can walk it in a few minutes. This is, not a big water, and it's a river, so it's not like, we went to Long Island, where you see things from so many different angles, and it's an inlet. It's a river, so, it's a small waterfront, but really using that as an anchor, I think, to your question, I think would be just fabulous. So, and a selling point for businesses, for everything. I mean, that's something that is a big deal. People move to river towns for a reason. So excited. Don't want to get our hopes up too high. Valerie, you're not getting paid unless we get the money. Just no pressure.
I second that.
And I'm really hopeful. I think people will be very excited. I think we're doing all the right thing. I just would add that, like, in addition to feedback, down to the development committee did some work. I don't know if that should be included as input. It's a little bit old. I don't know.
Some of the things that
But they
they're
had some
recommending
ideas in
are
there.
reflected in,
Are they?
in this, and
Great.
certainly like we've included, the other things that bode well for the community is because community engagement is so important, because when they announce this, you have 6 weeks to do everything, and theoretically, it's things you're doing over
Right.
time, but we had this really wonderful opportunity, like we've done more community engagement this year than we've probably done in the last 3 years, so between the comprehensive
Well,
plan,
that's my
parking
point,
study.
You have that to add to that whole community.
Yeah, so
engagement.
we really have this, and that's really how what the state's looking to see is a strategic plan that stands alone, not just an isolated grant, but something that we're gonna work towards no matter what. It's just with that $10 million, it's going to come. And
Yeah,
I
that's
think
great.
that that's what we have that story. We've demonstrated that we can move forward on that story. We have a unified and committed board, and the public, there are lots of ideas. We have a diverse community, but the things that we found, even doing, the look and feel of the community, maintaining history, art and culture, vibrancy, unique businesses, artisanal businesses, it is fairly consistent.
Good.
And not to diminish the waterfront as a landmark. The Hudson River is one of our greatest assets. So with Sing Sing Prison Museum, it really does complete a story.
And the housing and the change in lifestyle. Anyway, I'm looking at the clock. So, did we cover all the bases that you needed? Very excited about
Yeah,
this.
we will add the redesign of the
Intersection.
the intersection improvements,
Option
and
one.
we'll have that.
Option one.
Option one. We will not mention anything else, but we'll we'll look at that, and I think that is a nice complementary project to everything we're doing. It makes a lot of sense.
Great, thank you. What else do we have? Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Looks like the end of the meeting.
It is the end of the meeting, so we want to, we're finished with the agenda.
Oh,
so-
okay. I feel like you were about to say something.
No, I apologize. We are done with the
Okay.
meeting, so
It is 10 o'clock. I think we are
adjourning for advice of counsel.
adjourning for executive and advice of counsel.
So moved.
Okay,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Oh my gosh, I'm
We
so
got-
sorry.
you got that. Yay!
It was found. Thank you, everybody. We will see everybody again next Monday for legislative session. Have a good evening.